Hi everyone. It's currently July 4th, 2016, and it's Independence Day. Or at least it's technically Independence Day when I'm recording this, because it is currently 4:02 in the morning. If you've been listening to this podcast for the entire time I've been putting it out, I guess, you'll know that I tend to record these, well, depending on your perspective, it's either the dead of night or it is very early in the morning, though I guess technically it's both. I guess the sun's right about to come up now, and I'm going to be going to bed here soon, but I needed to get this podcast done, so I decided, throw caution into the wind. Let's record this right now at 4 in the morning. I could be watching Summer Games Done Quick right now. I think they're currently in the Awful Games Done Quick block as I'm telling you this. I think it's like a Barbie game. Either they're playing right now or was up next or whatever, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that I'm on the new computer finally. Finally got it all running. I put the PC building video up. Gosh, that was probably like 2 weeks ago at this point. Time flies when you're doing lots of different things. It took me a while to get squared away on this new computer. Obviously, I think I mentioned this in the video a little bit. There's going to be growing pains when you're going from an operating system like Windows XP, which came out in like 2001, to Windows 10, which just came out a few months ago. So, there's been growing pains trying to get all set up with all my software and everything. Some of it straight up doesn't work on Windows 10 anymore, and I had to deal with that and find workarounds. I had a big panic a while ago with FL Studio, the software I use to make music. There was a specific plugin for like guitar effects that wasn't working. So I thought, I'd have to upgrade everything. I'd have to get to a new FL Studio. I'd have to get a new guitar plugin, all this stuff. So I upgraded to FL Studio 12, which I think is the newest version. And something I really hate about upgrading from old software to new software is that, like, more than often than not, you run into scenarios where the newest version of a piece of software is kind of garbage all of a sudden. I ran into this with Goldwave, which is a program I used to use. I still use it to record audio sometimes. I'm recording this in Audacity right now, but I still use Goldwave for a lot of different things. And there was a time many years ago where I upgraded to the newest version of Goldwave, and it was just junk. It was garbage. They took away features I was using. The program crashed a lot more often. You just run into that a lot. On my laptop, right after I got that laptop, I installed a torrent software on it, uTorrent. And I figured, whatever, I'll just get the newest version. No, don't get the newest version of uTorrent, because they fill it full of like malware and adware, and I ended up getting a virus from the newest version of uTorrent. And I had to roll back to like 1.6, which was the version right before they added malware. And it's a mess sometimes upgrading software. So I upgraded to this new version of FL Studio, version 12, and they changed the look of the program. They changed what the buttons do. I couldn't drag and drop my plugins like I wanted to. It's just garbage. And you look at the forums for ImageLine, the people who make FL Studio, and it's all the developers leaving comments from people complaining, like with legitimate complaints about the software turning to crap. And their responses are just kind of them shrugging their shoulders and going, well, we can't fix it. We don't know how it works. Just deal with it. And it's like, you wrote the software. How do you not know how this works? How can you not fix it? Why do these plugins not work anymore? Why does this interface look so different and so wrong and so bad? So I had to roll back to my old version of FL Studio. I did this big rigmarole of finding a guitar plugin that would work with it and everything else, and it was kind of a nightmare. And even just recording this podcast was kind of a nightmare, because I plugged in my nice new, well, it's not new, but my nice microphone, my $45 Behringer CAD U37 microphone. I plugged it into a USB 3 port here on my new computer, and it wasn't working right. The audio was all crackly. It was constantly changing like sample rates in the middle of recording, which If you don't know what that means, you'd hear my voice the way I'm talking right now, and all of a sudden it would cut out for a second, and then when it would come back, I'd sound kind of like this, because it was recording at a higher sample rate than it was playing back at, and it sounded terrible. And I couldn't figure, I was like legitimately worried that I wouldn't be able to record this podcast on this microphone anymore. And I unplugged it from the back of the computer. Almost all my USB ports on this new computer are USB 3.0, which is the new standard. I have one lone USB 2.0 port here in the front, so I plugged it into the USB 2.0 port, and it seems to be working fine now. I think it's just an incompatibility with USB 3. But yeah, that's part of the magic of upgrading a computer, I guess. Part of the headache is not only just the process of tracking down all the software you used to have, remembering all the settings you used to have on the software, but then also dealing with the fact that the old software you used might not work anymore on the new system. So that's what I've been doing for the last 2 weeks. That and like working at the thrift store and everything else. Which leads, I suppose I should, before I get any further, I always do this. I never remember what I'm supposed to tell you guys at the start of this podcast. Because I usually think, okay, front of the podcast, here's what I'm going to introduce with whatever, and I always forget something. Probably because I didn't write it here in my notes, but this podcast is currently free for everyone. Normally this podcast goes up first for Patreons, and then a month later it becomes free for everyone. This month is a little bit different. This month is going to be free for everyone. This is going to go up on my YouTube channel as a video for people to watch if they just want to listen to the podcast. It's also just going to go up on Patreon for free. And I'm doing this because it's my birthday this month, and I figured, gotta give back. Well, I don't have to give back, but you know what I mean, right? It's a special occasion. So everyone gets this month's podcast for free. And if you're a free listener and don't subscribe to my Patreon, don't give me money, or I guess pledge is the right word I'm looking for. Last month's podcast should be going up for free. June, and then there's podcasts for May and April, and I think March. March might have been the first month I started doing this. Wow, we're our fourth month now? That's pretty impressive. But yeah, free podcasts for all for my birthday, so happy birthday to me. Anyway, what I was going to get at before I had to tell you about this podcast being free, where's the video? If you're a YouTube subscriber listening to this podcast for the first time, you might not know, but for the last 6.5 months now, I've been working on a video. If you remember, there's this YouTube channel called Good Blood who did this video called Dear Sega, and in this video, it's this Australian guy, I think. He breaks down how he would reboot Sonic the Hedgehog, or how Sega should reboot Sonic the Hedgehog, and he explores all these themes about, what he thinks Sonic's intended audience is, and I felt the need to respond to him, and I felt the need to respond to him over a year ago, so I wrote a script out for a video, and then I sat on it for like 6 months because I got busy with all this other stuff with weddings and jury duty and house sitting and everything else. And then long about December, I thought, okay, well, 2016 is going to be Sonic's 25th anniversary, so I should probably get that reboot response video done. So that's what I've been working on since about December. Revising the script, rewriting everything, cleaning it up, doing all this artwork, capturing video. It has been the biggest video I've ever produced, and my Patreon supporters who listen to this podcast frequently will know that I've probably said that last sentence about this being the biggest video I've ever done, like for the last 4 months now. So, yes, it is a big video, and hopefully, I say hopefully, it has to be done this month, because July 22nd is the Sonic 25th anniversary party, and that's where they're going to announce the new Sonic game. And technically, it probably isn't going to come out until next year, but I figure that if I'm going to do a reboot response video where I talk about how I would make a Sonic game if I was given the chance, like a full-on 3D Sonic game, I should probably have it out before they announce the new one, or at least around there so that the timing is right so that more people watch my video and, my channel grows and all this other stuff. But as for what I've done on it this month, it's been almost nothing, because I've been building the computer, I've been getting all my settings squared away, reinstalling all my software. I did the PC building video. Surprisingly, that didn't take me very long. That took me about 2 days to put together, which is shocking to me, because I had like 5 or 6 or 7 hours of footage to sift through. And the fact that I was able to parse all that out and squeeze it down and do it all in 2 days is hopefully a portent of things to come with this new computer, because normally that kind of video would be this big laborious process of, just having to go and go and go, and Sony Vegas would be so slow, and that's definitely not the case anymore, and I'm very happy about that. But we'll see. The PC building video and then the Sonic reboot video are two completely different kinds of chicken, I guess, if you want to say it. I don't know why my mind went to chicken, but that's just how it was. Because I'm learning the difference of how easy it is to edit footage that is shot versus having to draw all this artwork and coordinate what is basically animation. That's why the reboot response video has taken me so long, is because I'm doing all this artwork and animation, and I have to come up with an art style for the video and all this other stuff. But yeah, July 22nd is my unflinching deadline for this month. I cannot, under any circumstances, miss that deadline. And that's going to be tough. That's going to be hard, because what's still left to do before I can jump into Sony Vegas is, I said there was some animation work I'm doing on this video. That's actually really true. If you've been keeping up with my blog, I posted some animation samples a few months ago. That needs to all be incorporated somehow. I think normally what people would do is they would import that stuff into Flash and then animate it like that, like motion tweening and all this other stuff, where it's technical. I can't really explain it very well, but I don't have Flash, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to use QuickTime Fusion 2.5, which is kind of like Flash, and then build all the animation in that, like this big animated infographic thing. You'll see it in the video when I'm done, but I'm going to animate it in QuickTime Fusion 2.5 and then record it using OBS, and then that'll be the MP4 that I drop into the edited video, and hopefully that'll work. And if this all sounds crazy, if it sounds like I'm jumping around a lot and talking a million miles a minute, because it kind of feels like it to me, like I'm just, spattering nonsense everywhere, just know that it is a complicated process and has been a complicated process, and I am very much looking forward to getting this video out of my life finally, because something I've been doing in the interim, while I get everything all set up in my new computer, is I've been playing PC games that I haven't been able to play before, and I haven't really been playing tons, because I feel guilty starting a long-term game project while I'm in the middle of doing all this video production, but we'll get to this later. I have a whole list of games I want to talk about that I've been playing on the new computer. But what else have I been doing creatively in the last month? I've continued to write on my Sonic 06 book, slowly but surely. It usually only really happens during lunch breaks at work, and I only work weekends, basically. So, as you can imagine, sorry I had to take a drink there, I don't know if I'll leave that in. As you can imagine, working only 5 or 6 days a month, a 30-minute lunch break, progress is sluggish, but it's moving forward. If you're listening to this podcast for free on YouTube or on Patreon, I actually posted a book sample. I think it was last month before that. It was the first 3 chapters. I'm currently probably about halfway through writing chapter 4 right now. Chapter 4 has been dealing with, kind of touching on internet fandom and just the thought process of that. Not really the thought process of that. It'll probably get to that point if I keep writing on it. But right now it's just more history, origin stuff about internet culture and fandom and things like that. But yeah, that continues slowly but surely. What really happens though is I'll write on it a little bit at work, and then, when I get home, it's still in my mind, and I usually end up writing a little bit at home too. So it's not just on lunch breaks, but it's slow going, but slow going is still going. And in some ways, going slowly is almost better than rushing things because, when you're writing a book and you're going slowly, you get a chance to really think things out as you go through it, like a real deep thought about something. And that can be really good. And there's like this weird thing I'm noticing, and I don't really understand how it works. I don't know if it's like magic or what, but lately, the last 3 months while I'm writing this book, I don't know if it's something subconscious or what, but I'll be writing a subject in the book, and then it's like that becomes my whole world in a way that's really like bizarre. Like, for an example, I was writing about the original Sonic Adventure for a chapter, and I don't know if it was just me noticing it more, but people started like talking about Sonic Adventure in my life. And then when I moved on to Sonic Adventure 2, the same thing started happening there. It's like all this information starts coming out about Sonic Adventure 2. And now that I'm writing about like the community stuff, Sonic community stuff, this old chat room I used to go to called MSC, which is short for Missy's Sonic Chat. It was a really old chat room on this website called Bassine. Just a couple days ago, somebody contacted me about MSC, just out of the blue. And it's like, what is going on here? There's a word for this, and it makes me sound not crazy. I don't know what the word is, but it's like, I guess it's like that Charlie Brooker sketch where he brings in two advertisers and he asks them to like build him a logo for like a pet cemetery service. And they come up with this logo that's like two headstones and angel wings or something. And he comes out and he shows them a logo he drew 1 week earlier, and it is identical to their logo. And he explains it all as this subconscious linking where on the cab ride over to his office, where he was going to give them the job of designing the logo, he placed all this imagery around the city so that they would see it outside the car window, and that would give them the idea for the logo when they got to the office. He had subconsciously implanted these images into their heads without them even realizing it, and that's how his logo, the logo he drew a week prior, ended up matching up with their logo almost exactly. And I think maybe it's this thing where, because it's on my mind, I start talking about related subjects like that, and then it just loops back around. It's weird though. It's just, maybe I'm just paranoid. I'm probably just paranoid. I'm probably just like a big weirdo. But it's the craziest thing, and I kind of love it. I kind of love stuff like that. It's just, I don't know, whatever. But yeah, book writing. Catch it. I don't know. Anyway, let's move on to the games I've been playing, I guess, because I'm on Windows 10 now. I'm on a considerably more modern computer than I used to be, and I kind of love this computer. And I keep worrying. I think I also mentioned this in the PC building video a little bit. It acts kind of funny sometimes. I don't know if the graphics card is weird. I don't know if it's a heat issue, because this computer gets hot. I have a program on here called Everest that reads CPU temperatures, and this thing heats up like you would not believe. And all of a sudden the hard drive just spun up. I don't know if you guys can hear that. But we'll see what happens to Audacity. And I think I'm just going to wait here for a minute while it crunches numbers or whatever it's doing. Because last time when I was recording this on my laptop up at my cousin's place last month, I noticed that there was a chunk of the podcast missing because that laptop started, I guess it was heating up or it fell behind or something. But it looks like it's calming down now. Is like Steam downloading something? What's going on here? No, I don't know what's going on. Oh, I guess something did, yeah. The Sega Classics, whatever. Anyway, back to what I was talking about games I've played and my paranoia about this computer, which I just put on display for everyone. The graphics card's acting a little bit weird, and I don't know if it's a heat issue, because like I said, with Everest, this thing gets pretty hot. Like, I probably need to buy a new cooler for this thing because the temperatures, when this thing's really crunching numbers on like video encoding or whatever, it's getting up to like 99, 100 degrees Celsius. And I think I read somewhere online that Intel CPUs are designed to go up to about 105 Celsius before they shut down, and getting up to 100 sounds really dangerous to me, especially on my old computer where I had that really nice expensive CPU cooler where it wouldn't ever, like, the hottest that thing would get was like 45 and 50 degrees. And this, with the stock cooler, it's getting up to 99 and 100. I have a solution in place for that. If you didn't know, if you go into your Windows power management settings, you can actually dial down your CPU percentage a little bit, the max CPU percentage allowed, and that'll keep the system a little bit cooler. So I'm running now on like 90% CPU, but that's fine. It is still so much faster than my old computer. And as long as it stays running cool, I think that's more important than anything else. At least until I can save up enough money to buy a new cooler. I could buy one right now, but I have other commitments that need money. I need to buy a new camera. I need to buy a new scanner. I need clothes primarily. I haven't bought any new clothes in like 4 years. And the shirts I'm wearing are getting kind of old looking. Some of them have holes in them where like they get caught on doorways and things like that. So I need to buy clothes probably first and foremost above everything else. And buying clothes is expensive. Even just like plain t-shirts. I was going to order some online last night, and a single $8 shirt, when you factor in shipping, comes to like $14 for a shirt, for a plain shirt. Not even like a graphic t-shirt, but just a shirt, a regular shirt. $13, $14. That's ridiculous. But that probably comes first. And then after that, I can think about, do I need a new graphics card? Do I need a cooler? Do I want to buy a camera? Do I want to buy a scanner? There's probably a lot more that I'm not thinking of. But right now, it's good enough. I like it. OBS works great. I was doing some streaming the other day. And I don't have that big of upstream, so it's not like super great or whatever. But boy, I'm just... This is like a stream of consciousness right now. You can't tell that it is late in the night, can you? No, of course not. To get back to the subject, I said like 5 minutes ago, the games I've played on this new computer, they're pretty cool. I like video games. But seriously, there are a lot of games for this computer now that I didn't used to be able to play that I now can play. And top of that list is Metal Gear Solid 5 Ground Zeroes. It feels really bizarre to be able to play a game released on the PC last year, this big, like, I guess it's like a AAA next-gen game, or I guess now it's current gen, but it's next generation to me. And to be able to play it and, like, all the settings default to like high detail, and it runs 60 frames per second, and it looks fantastic, and it's a pretty fun game. I streamed a little bit of it yesterday. For like this quick, supposedly like demo thing, there's a lot to do in that game, and I'm starting to learn how to screw around with the guards, because they have this really like actually sort of impressive artificial intelligence where they can see you from really far away, and they get curious about things, and you can make them paranoid, and they'll chase you down. And it's a fun game, and it looks good, and I'm happy with it a great deal. Next on the list of brand new games that I wasn't able to play that now I can. Oh, excuse me. Platinum's Legend of Korra game. I think this was another gift from a friend. And that Legend of Korra is a weird game. I never saw the Legend of Korra season, but, I like Platinum action games. I saw most of The Last Airbender. I feel really bad for Platinum for the Legend of Korra game, because it feels like they had some really cool ideas for things to do with Korra, and they just didn't have the budget for any of it. The environments get so repetitive. The thugs you fight are so repetitive. There's only like 2 or 3 boss encounters in the entire game, and you fight them like 4 or 5 times each. You just fight them over and over and over again. It's the same enemies over and over and over again. You fight in the same city in like different times of day, like 6 times. It is ridiculous how thinly they stretched that content. But, I can't really blame them. I'm sure that wasn't really Platinum's fault. I get the feeling that was probably Activision. Activision wanted a cheap licensed game, so they contacted Platinum and said, okay, can you make a game for this amount of money? And Platinum said, well, it'll be this, it'll be that. But yes, we can. And that's what Legend of Korra was. My understanding is, I haven't played them yet, but Platinum also did that Transformers Devastation game, and more recently the Ninja Turtles game. And from what I understand, it was the same kind of deal on those games too. Like, they're weirdly low budget. And I don't know, man, because from what I've heard, that Transformers game is full price. Korra, I think, was $20, but Transformers is $60, and so is Ninja Turtles. But it's still like this weird low budget thing. I don't know. I don't know if Platinum's really getting the long end of the stick there. I'm sure Activision is a business, right? So obviously they've run the numbers, and then they know how much they can charge for this game based on how many people bought Korra. But it's still, something about it doesn't feel right. And I feel bad for Platinum, because I don't think they're getting their money's worth with Activision, and I don't know what they're hoping to accomplish at the end of this. Was it did they have a contract to, put all these games out? Did they sign a 3-game deal with Activision is what I'm asking. Because I don't know. I don't see why they'd continue to squeeze out these weird, cheap, licensed games unless Activision's paying them, more money to make these games, and Platinum is deliberately trying to cheap out to, save money to funnel into projects like Bayonetta and Scalebound. I don't know. It's all so weird. Korra was fun, but there wasn't enough to it. I wanted more environments. I wanted more things to do. I wanted a longer game, because I beat the whole thing in a single sitting. It's a little over 4 hours long. And even in that 4 hours, it feels so repetitive. It's just, I don't know. It's just a weird thing. But the fighting is fun. The fighting mechanics. Platinum, of course, are the masters of the counterattack, where an enemy comes in and you dodge the last moment, and then you counter and you blow them away, and that feels so good. And that feeling carries the entire Legend of Korra game. But yeah, I wish there was more to it. I really do. Next on the list is Grid 2, which is a Codemasters racing game. The original Grid was probably the first Codemasters game that, put them on the map for me. I had old Codemasters games from way back in the day, Micro Machines and what have you. But I feel like the first Grid and Dirt 2 was really the racing games that solidified Codemasters as this racing game studio. And the original Grid was pretty cool because it, had all this stylish music and had this really nice presentation. And those kind of became the hallmark for Codemasters racing games. I think it's probably not controversial to say that Dirt 2 was probably their pinnacle of the racing game series, but Grid 2 is turning out to be pretty good too. It's not really Dirt 2. What I really liked about Dirt 2 was the whole, the way that game was presented is that you were on tour with this racing festival or whatever, and you were globetrotting all over the world to all these different events, and you had all these real world drivers with you that would talk to you during races, but it was always just these little quips. It wasn't really a story mode or anything. It was just, Travis Pastrana would say, oh, good work, dude, after you'd win a race. And that was kind of cool. And, you'd bump into him on the track and you'd go, hey, watch it. Or you'd be driving along and, what's his name? Dave Mira would be like, oh, nobody's really talking. I guess we're focused on the race, huh? And it was just this little extra touch that felt so good. And Grid 2 feels like it's trying to take those concepts to the next level. And that's kind of a problem because I've only played Grid 2 for about an hour now, and it is full of talking. the whole conceit of the single player is that you're working for this guy who's trying to put together something he's calling the World Series of Racing. And it's just, he talks your ear off about everything. And while he's talking to you and explaining, like, race team rivalries and event types and all this other junk, you can't, like, do anything. It's like a cutscene without any people in it. You're just staring at a computer monitor with a menu on it, and he's just talking and talking and talking and talking, and you can't move the menu cursor at all. You can't select any event types until he's done talking, and that is the worst. I hate it. And he never shuts up. And, like, you can tell Codemasters knew that there was too much talking in this game, because they try and spread it out as much as they can. You'll do a race and you'll have somebody, like, from your pit crew in your ear constantly telling you about, how the controls work and what you're supposed to do and how many people you have left to overtake. And, they're talking to you constantly. And then you get out of the race and you get the big long introduction about the World Series of Racing. And then it goes in a little bit more and it makes you enter your name. And then you get more about the World Series of Racing. And then you go into a test track where they have you do, like, braking tutorials and cornering tutorials and drifting tutorials. And again, you just have somebody in your ear constantly telling you how to drive. And then you hear more about the World Series of Racing, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. And there's tutorials for everything. I mentioned that there was a tutorial for braking and for drifting. Well, the game also, Grid 2 feels the need to explain to you what a race is. There's a point where you're picking your very first event ever in the game, and you get a little video that pops up on the computer monitor, and it says, a race event is when you overtake other drivers with the goal of getting first place. Blah, 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 blah. And it's like, shut up. I know what a race is. Who is playing Grid 2 that doesn't know what a race is? Are you insane? And you can't skip it. And despite all my ranting and raving and annoyance about how they won't shut up, Grid 2 is actually a pretty alright game. It is a Codemasters racing game, which at this point is a known quantity because they've done Grid 1, Dirt 2, Dirt 3, Dirt Showdown, which wasn't very good. And now I think Grid 2 is in the middle of that somewhere. And it's fun. It's realistic enough without being like a Forza game or a Gran Turismo. It's arcadey, but not too arcadey. It's realistic, but not too realistic. It's kind of like this perfect middle ground. And I think it's one of those racing games where they have like tons of assists and everything. So that if you want, you can turn the assists off and it gets more and more and more realistic. I'm not that kind of crazy person. I got Gran Turismo 3 for free not too long ago, like a year ago, and that's a hard game for me to play because it's a little too realistic for me. So having games like Grid 2 and Project Gotham, so I guess they don't really make Project Gotham games anymore, but back in the day they used to make Project Gotham games, and that and Grid and Dirt and all those stuff, that was kind of my racing bread and butter. So Grid 2 is a good game, with the caveat that I wish they would just shut up and let me drive, because it's the worst otherwise. Played the Evil Within demo. I didn't initially want to play this. I mean, I watched the Super Best Friends Let's Play of the Evil Within, so I know basically everything that happens in that game. So I know it's not a very good game. It's by Shinji Mikami, the guy who did Resident Evil 4, and Bethesda was kind of spinning the Evil Within as the next great game from the creator of Resident Evil 4, and you can tell that the Evil Within is Shinji Mikami trying to revisit the concepts of Resident Evil 4 in a new context, and he wanted to put the horror back in survival horror or whatever it was he said. But it didn't turn out very well. And the demo is, I don't know. I liked it at first. It has great atmosphere. I was going to say it has good atmosphere, but it has great atmosphere. I love the atmosphere of this game. But the further you play, the worse it gets. And there was one specific point in the demo where I ran into probably the worst part about The Evil Within, and that is the game's checkpointing system. And the weird thing about The Evil Within's checkpointing system is... Okay, so you think about a video game normally, right? You run through an area, you kill all the enemies, it checkpoints you somewhere, and then you die. And when you respawn, you're basically returning to the state in the world the way you left it, right? So everything you killed will still be dead, all the puzzles you solved will still be solved, so on and so forth. That's not how the checkpointing system in The Evil Within works. It's how it kind of works, but not really. So the demo lasts for what feels like forever. I think I played it for like 2 hours. It felt like it was going to keep going. I don't know how long the demo actually was. It was like 10 gigabytes. So it could have been like a 4 or 5 hour demo, because that's like 10 gigabytes is probably like a third of that game's overall size. But anyway, I was playing it for about 2 hours. And it starts you off in this hospital, and eventually you go through this industrial section, and then you end up in like this alternate dimension area where it is very clearly trying to riff on the village area from Resident Evil 4. It's all these like stone like village houses. Like European countryside where you have straw roofs, and it's all these cobblestone is the word I was looking for. These cobblestone houses with straw roofs and all this wooden architecture and like old style farms and maybe a castle or two. So you go through this big long section where it's teaching you like stealth mechanics and all this other stuff. And the stealth in this game is like so garbage. I'm trying to even find the words to describe it. You have to sneak up on a monster without being seen, and then you stab them in the head with this knife you have, or whatever it is. And something that monsters like to do is you'll get right up on them, and they'll turn around and look at you. There's no indication that they heard you. There's no indication of anything. They just sometimes, like the random number generator says, make this monster turn around and screw up your stealth kill. And I don't like that. That's bad. So you fight through all this area, and you get deeper and deeper into the village, and you meet this doctor who's in the alternate Resident Evil 4 dimension with you. He's like, we have to go get my patient Leslie. He just went beyond that gate. I'll distract the zombies, and you can go down there and open the gate for me. You go down there, and you get to the chain that holding the gate down, and your character, Sebastian, looks at the chain, and he goes, man, I can't move this chain. I can't cut this. If only I had a chainsaw. And you're thinking, oh, of course. If only you had a chainsaw. I wonder if there is anything in this spooky Resident Evil 4 village that has a chainsaw. So you go and you unleash the bad guy with the chainsaw. And of course, this is the Resident Evil 4 village, so it's this guy with a bag over his head, and he has a chainsaw, and he chases after you, and it's considered like the boss encounter of this area. I died in that section because it is remarkably easy to die. The boss has just a one-hit kill, where if he comes up behind you from a certain angle, he will just stab you through the stomach with his chainsaw, and you're dead. It doesn't matter how much health you had. Nothing matters. You're just dead. That's just it. You're done. Restart from a checkpoint. And now here's where things get weird. When it restarts me from the checkpoint, the puzzles I have solved are still solved. The enemies I have killed are still killed. But what the game does now is it puts new stuff in my way, stuff that wasn't even there before I died. So I died, it reset me to where I was, and then it put new stuff in my way. There are now enemies in places where there weren't enemies. There are now like traps in places where there weren't traps. And that is awful. Because something else it does when it checkpoints you is it saves how many resources you have. So if you've been, shooting up enemies willy-nilly and wasting all this ammo like I was doing, when you restart from the checkpoint, you restart with nothing. You don't have any bullets. You don't have any healing items. You're just screwed. And now, because I'd used all my ammo to take out all the enemies in this area, but now there are new enemies in this area, and I don't have enough ammo to deal with them. I don't have enough healing items if they come after me and they attack me. And worst of all, instead of checkpointing me at the point where the boss comes at me, it checkpoints me like 2 minutes ahead of that. So for me to trigger this boss, I have to go hiking all the way across the village, look at the chain, hike all the way back across the village, and then trigger the boss. And between those 2 points, between where I start, where the chain is, and where the boss is, which is like right next to where I start after a checkpoint, there's like 4 enemies. And again, I have no ammo. I have nothing. And I need to save my ammo for the boss. So that is where I stopped playing the demo. And I've thought, maybe I'll go back to the demo because, it's so long and it saves your progress and all this other stuff. Maybe I'll go back and I'll finish it one day. But it would also be really, really nice to have that 10 gigabytes back because I'm a little strapped on hard drive space. But yeah, The Evil Within, that's a game that feels like it is one deep polishing session away from actually being really good, because everything about it is just a little bit rough around the edges, and rough around the edges in a way that's not charming. It's actually like everything about it is just a little too annoying, and maybe that was intentional because, again, Shinji Mikami said The Evil Within was him trying to return to his survival horror roots or whatever, so it makes sense that ammo would be scarce and healing items would be scarce. Because Resident Evil 4 was just an action movie. It was rarely ever, scary. It was more intense. And I think The Evil Within is trying to be more scary than anything else. And I'd like it tweaked a little bit more to go back in the Resident Evil 4 direction if it was up to me. What else have I played? We're reaching the end of the list here, so if you're worried about me rambling on and on and on and on about all these video games I've played, there's maybe 2 or 3 left. Depending on whether or not I want to talk about some of these other things. Suppose next we'll talk about Disney Infinity 3.0. And the entire reason I'm bringing this up is because, no, I did not buy any Disney Infinity figures. What happened is, here, I'm looking around on my computer desk, hang on. Well, I don't have it with me right now, but, I was coming out of Walmart about 2 months ago, and in the parking lot, there was this little, card. It was a Disney Infinity card for Aladdin and Jasmine. And if you didn't know how all this works, the way Disney Infinity works is, of course, it's a Skylanders kind of thing, right? You plug the portal into your game console and you put the figure on the portal and that character shows up in the game. What you didn't probably know is that the computer version, the personal computer version, none of the portals work for it. So none of the figures work for the PC version, but there's still a PC version. So how that works is essentially it's all download codes. Instead of buying physical figures, what you can do, and what is probably more cost effective, is you can just buy digital versions of all the figures for the PC version. And when you buy a physical figure, what it does is it comes with this little card with an 8-digit code on it, and then you launch the Disney Infinity game, and you redeem this code in the PC version, and you get that figure. So I found this code in the Walmart parking lot it was basically getting a $30 playset for free. And what am I going to do about it? Am I just going to leave it there on the ground? I mean, I'm sure that whatever kid got the Aladdin and Jasmine set was probably more interested in the toys than the computer code. So, what I ended up doing is once I built this new computer, I ended up installing Disney Infinity 3.0 and using this code. And that's also because if you didn't know, Disney Infinity 3.0 on the PC has been basically free to play. You can just download the client and it doesn't really matter because it doesn't cost anything. They expect you to instead buy digital versions of all these figures for $7 a pop. And once a friend found out that I had registered this Aladdin and Jasmine code, what he offered to do was to go through, because he has a giant Disney Infinity figure collection, just absolutely huge. He has all the Star Wars figures, a lot of the Marvel figures. He has just this giant collection. He said he would go through and register the digital versions of all his figures to my account. So until Disney Infinity on the computer shuts down at whatever point in the future that is, I have 30 or 40 figures on my account now. I have Iron Man, I have all the Star Wars guys, Donald Duck. It's nuts. So I played a little bit of that because one of the very first tutorial areas for that game is Inside Out, the Pixar movie. And he recommended Inside Out to me specifically because he said it was a platformer like Super Mario 3D World. And I guess it's kind of like that, but not really. I don't know if I'd specifically say it was like Super Mario 3D World personally, but it is a platformer and it is fun. It's very pretty looking. But yeah, Disney Infinity 3.0 is a pretty cool game, and there is like so much in that game to do. I remember I played the Inside Out portion for like 2 hours, and I thought, okay, this is pretty cool, but I'm getting kind of bored. You know, I want to switch to a different game. I want to go play something else. So I exited out of the Inside Out portion, and that brought up a whole nother tutorial about the hub world and driving and combat. And I must have played Disney Infinity that day for like 5 or 6 hours, just trying out all this other stuff about riding a Wampa through Halloween Town as Stitch. That was pretty fun. But yeah, it's really a shame that Disney Infinity 3, or just Disney Infinity in general, is shutting down. I don't know if I'll be able to keep the PC version. I assume that like it might even be shut down now because the last time I played it was a week ago or 2 weeks ago. But I assume that as a result, I'm sure the console versions will probably still keep working into the future. But I'd assume that the PC version has to phone home a lot more than the console version does because of these download codes. So I assume that whenever the Disney Infinity service shuts down, the PC version will just straight up stop working. So I should actually get in there and play some more of that as soon as possible because, there's so much in there that I haven't seen. And he also recommended to me that I check out the Star Wars portion of Disney Infinity because that, for 3.0, the combat engine, the fighting, was done by Ninja Theory, which did the most recent Devil May Cry game. They're doing that Hellblade game. I don't know, like, there's a bad stigma around Ninja Theory because of that Devil May Cry game. But I still think they're probably pretty good at combat systems. Probably not as good as Platinum, probably not as good as classic Capcom, which is basically Platinum. But they're better than most, I'd say. So I should, boot that up someday soon before it shuts down, if it hasn't already, and try the Star Wars portion out because the Disney Infinity is a fun game. It's not like a great game. It's one of these things where it's kind of like Grand Theft Auto, where it's just good enough at everything that it doesn't matter that, there are better dedicated games out there to this stuff. But it's fun enough, and the graphics look nice. It runs really well on my computer. But yeah, that's pretty cool. What else is on my list here? Grip. Grip is a racing game. If you've ever played Roll Cage on the PlayStation, Grip is a spiritual successor to Roll Cage. It is currently in early access, and I mean like early access. This is probably the first early access game I've really experienced as early access, because it is really not done. It is just, there's like 3 tracks and 2 cars. That's how early access this game is. But the whole concept of Grip, if you didn't know, is, do you remember these remote-controlled cars from back in the 90s? They had like these really big wheels on them, so whenever they'd flip over, it was impossible to flip them over, because there'd always be wheels for it to stay on, right? I don't know how to explain this for radio where it makes sense, but it was like this car that was kind of like a clamshell shape, and the 4 wheels on the side were so big that even if you flipped the car upside down, it would still be on its wheels. That's kind of what Roll Cage was, and that's what Grip is. And what it means is that they really play with like being able to drive up walls and drive across the ceiling and, flipping your car over to do all these crazy stunts and things. And Roll Cage was really fun. Roll Cage was probably like my secret favorite racing game on the PlayStation. I own Roll Cage Stage 2 for the PlayStation. And then like a few years later, some Roll Cage fans got together and they took the PC version of Roll Cage and they made something called Roll Cage Redo. And by redo, I mean like the French word redux. Redux. And that fixed up the PC version. It added some new graphical effects. And that roll cage redo stayed on my system for years. It was something I was always going back to. And in fact, I reference roll cage in the upcoming video, and I have footage of roll cage redo as a result. And I think some of the team behind roll cage redo went ahead and formed the team that made Grip. And Grip is literally just roll cage. That's all it is. It's the same kind of cars. It's the same kind of tracks. It might as well just be roll cage HD remix. I mean, if that's what it was, that would be really cool. But the problem is that roll cage had a very specific driving model. It handled a very specific way. It was difficult to get a grips with, but it wasn't impossible. It had like a learning curve of learning how these vehicles controlled. And what Grip does about this is that I think it makes it kind of a little more realistic. And in doing so, it makes the game 1,000 times harder, because these tracks are so detailed now, and there's so much debris you can drive into and hit, and it'll flip your car around. And it is such a difficult game to play, because you can't drive in a straight line in that game, because you're always being tossed into the air. You're always being spun around. And apparently when I played Grip a couple weeks ago, that was right after their first major update that improved their driving model. I can't imagine what playing Grip felt like, 2 months ago, because right now it is still so difficult to drive. And I left a comment for them in their Steam profile or whatever. I wrote a review, and they wrote me a response back saying that, yes, they are still working on the driving model. They're still making improvements. They understand that it is a very difficult game to control, and that they're working on fixing that. So that's a good thing to hear, because that is a hard game to control. And hard enough that it was actually kind of a bummer to me, because it doesn't really feel like something that's very easy for me to play. So that's Grip, I guess. I have more written on here, we could talk about Gary's mod, though I guess the only thing I wanted to say about Gary's mod now is how it works on the new computer. On my old Windows XP machine with the 2 gigabytes of RAM, if I wanted to try and play a Gary's mod map, we were talking loading times that would seriously be in the 3 to 4 minutes realm. And now that I'm on this new computer, loading a Gary's mod map takes 18 seconds. And that's pretty cool. I also wanted to talk about the new Quake episode. MachineGames, the developers behind the new Wolfenstein game, The New Order, just released a brand new Quake episode out of the blue, just because it was the 20th anniversary. And it's a pretty cool new Quake episode. I played it through the Quake port called Dark Places. It feels a lot more like Doom, because one of the things about the original Quake is that the game was so cutting edge with its polygons and whatever else, advanced lighting engines, that they couldn't really do Doom levels, because one of the things that Doom really got into towards the end were these huge maps with where you were fighting 8, 10, 15, 20 monsters at a time. And because Quake was polygonal, they could no longer do that. So you could only fight 2 or 3 enemies at a time. What MachineGames does with their new Quake episode, I think it's called Dimensions of the Past or something. What they do with this is, because now it is 20 years since the original Quake was released, they start upping the enemy numbers. So you'll walk into a room and 10 enemies will come after you all at the same time. And it is kind of nuts to see that many enemies in Quake. Because the whole point of Quake is that because they couldn't do these large enemy numbers, they rebalanced all the enemies to make them more difficult to fight on the individual levels. So grunts and soldiers, not soldiers. What are the guys with the laser guns? I never can remember their names. There's grunts, and then there's enforcers. That's what they are. So you have grunts and enforcers and ogres and wizards and all this other stuff. And normally you'd only fight maybe 2 of them. And they were balanced around that. They'd have, high hit points. Their attacks would do a lot of damage. They were kind of slow-moving, I guess. And in this new Quake episode, you fight a lot of them. And it becomes this really... It almost starts to feel like horror after a point, because there is just so many of these enemies, and they are so tough, and they are used in so many interesting ways. And something I learned while playing this new Quake episode was that, because after I finished the episode, I went back and I played the original Quake a little bit. So you go back to the original Quake, and the original Quake isn't a very good game. I know people have a lot of reverence for Quake and what it did for multiplayer and all this other stuff. And, with 20th anniversary coming up, I have been watching a lot of retrospectives that try and be like, oh, Quake was this important milestone and this and that. But the single player of Quake sucks. Just straight up, it sucks. I started it on normal difficulty, and none of the maps feel as intuitive as Quake. As Doom, I should say. None of the Quake maps feel as intuitive as Doom. And it's just, I don't like the monsters. I don't like a lot of the weapons, like the grenade launcher. Who cares? The grenade launcher sucks. I'm sorry. The rocket launcher feels good. The rocket launcher is probably what established id Software as having these really awesome rocket launchers. But, I don't like splash damage because I'm a wimp. I don't like the shotguns. The nail gun is a cool idea in concept, but it's not very fun to use, at least not in the default Quake episodes. And it just Quake sucks. The maps are too big, the maps are too complex, there's too much puzzle solving. Doom had a purpose, right? It was this simplicity of find key card, open door. Quake gets into this thing where, you have to search the environment for buttons to open doors, buttons to raise gates, buttons, and just, it gets to be a little bit too much, because you're not focusing on shooting monsters anymore. You're not focusing on what's directly in front of you. Now you have to stop in every room, and you have to look up and around and all the ceilings and all the floors, and I don't, that's probably not even what I mean by saying I don't like Quake. That's just me trying to search for any reason to explain why I don't like Quake, and I'm not entirely sure why I don't like Quake. It doesn't feel like Doom does. And what MachineGames does with their new Quake episode is they make Quake feel more like Doom. And for that, it is a lot better. The puzzles are better. The enemy numbers are better. It's a hard episode, but I enjoyed it a great deal. I probably enjoyed MachineGames' new Quake episode more than I've ever enjoyed any of the other Quake, the official Quake episodes from id Software. So, for whatever that's worth. I guess that's probably about it for games I've been playing this month. As you can tell, it's been a lot of little bits of everything. I've got the Wii U version of Mario and Sonic 2016 Rio coming, so I'll be playing that soon. Actually, that's all the games I had listed, so, whatever. Oh, and the Expendabros. But you don't want to hear about the Expendabros. Broforce had its time in the spotlight, and this spin-off of Broforce featuring Expendables characters is whatever. It's fun, but it's not worth talking about, especially because I've been talking to you for about an hour now, and I need to get through things. I guess that's probably the end of the podcast. The only other thing I have listed here in my notes is things I bought during the Steam sale, which was Age of Empires 3, because I had that on Games for Windows Live, and that's probably not going to last forever. I bought Uninvited, the old MacVenture classic adventure game, because it was 75 cents, and who cares? I bought the Gas Guzzler Zombie DLC. I don't even remember what it was called. It's Gas Guzzler Zombie Nightmare or something. Let's see if I can figure it out. Full Metal Zombie, that's what it was. I don't even know how to play the Full Metal Zombie DLC. It's not showing up in any of my menus. It's not showing up anywhere. It sounds like that's a common problem too, because there's a bunch of posts on the Steam forums about, how do I play the Full Metal Zombie DLC? And the developer says, just restart Steam until it shows up in game, which is okay, cool. That's not really a very good solution. But it was $1.30, so I'm probably not going to complain too loudly about that. And finally, what I bought for myself was Aliens Colonial Marines, and I realize what a bad idea that is, because Aliens Colonial Marines is not really what would be considered a good game. But with this mod coming out that supposedly enhances everything, it's made me really curious about it. I want to see this mod in action for myself at some point. And it was only $3, so, it's not really like a huge deal. It's not like a lot of money out of my pocket. Honestly, the most in this pack of games that I bought for myself was Age of Empires 3. That was like $10 or like $11. And all combined, these 4 things that I bought, Colonial Marines, Age of Empires 3, Uninvited, and the Zombie DLC, it came to about $13. So, I didn't make out too bad in this Steam sale. There's still a bunch of stuff on my wish list, though. I noticed that because to get cards for the Steam summer sale event, you have to go through your discovery queue, which means that, you're tempted to add games to your wish list. And looking at my Steam wish list now, I have over 200 games on that wish list. That's a lot of games. Yeah. I should probably wrap this podcast up soon. I'm getting kind of talking fatigue, if you can't tell. I've been talking to a microphone for over an hour now, and it's something. Oh, and then of course, a friend of mine, Piers, gifted me every single Sega Genesis game on Steam for my birthday a couple days ago, which is like, that's all the Sonic games. That's like Comic Zone, Vector Man, Ristar, all the Streets of Rage games, all the Phantasy Star games, Beyond Oasis, Landstalker, all the Treasure games, like, oh no, I'm blanking on their names, Gunstar Heroes, Alien Soldier, and Dynamite Heady. I think there was another one in there too. I don't remember. But yeah, it was like 30 Genesis games, and now I own them all on Steam, and that's pretty cool. I was eyeballing the Humble Bundle that they have where you can get some of the Genesis Sonic games, and I was thinking, do I really want to spend that much on Genesis games? I wasn't really sure. And I was thinking about just buying the Genesis games on their own, like the Sonic Genesis games, I mean. And I was waffling back and forth, and then it's just that this drops into my Steam account a couple days ago, and it made me real happy. And a couple days ago, I streamed Sonic 3 Complete, which I streamed it on the wrong settings, so it was a blurry nightmare. But yeah, that's the end of this podcast. It's a little longer than normal, but we'll call this a birthday special. If you're listening to this for free, and you want to hear next month's episode the moment it goes up, go to patreon.com/blazehedgehog and just throw $1 at me. $1 a month will get you access to this podcast if you found this interesting. You also get a bunch of other goodies. Lately I've been posting my music archive up on Patreon, and I actually need to get on posting the second pack here soon, because it's been a couple weeks. I don't want to post all the music all at once, because then it will be, there's like a Patreon dashboard like on Tumblr where it shows all the posts, and I don't want to just flood 30 posts all at once. Plus that would max out my upload and everything else. But if you want to get to my music archive with all my unreleased music, you can get that at Patreon. That's at the $2 level. If you want to read the book sample I uploaded a couple months ago or last month or whatever it was, that's at the $2 level. If you want to get monthly podcasts, that's $1 a month. I think I've been putting most of my stuff under the $1 a month banner, though I'm not really sure. There's also all kinds of other stuff. There's secret unlisted videos. There's you get to play early builds of the games I'm working on before I post them publicly. Gosh, what else? And even if you don't give me money for Patreon, I have a bunch of free posts up there too, so you can still get cool stuff from my Patreon for free. Just head up to patreon.com/blazehedgehog. Blazehedgehog is all one word, just like my YouTube username, and just like my Tumblr username, and just like my Twitter username. And you can follow me on all those things too if you want to. But I think that's going to do it for the podcast this month. I will see all you guys in August, and hopefully by then I'll have this dumb reboot response video complete and uploaded. So I think I'm going to get ready and go to bed, and I'm going to end this podcast. So, good night, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon. I'm so tired.